But when we move beyond the politics, we have the individual action, right? And we have the collective action that happens at a subnational scale. And the unfortunate reality of a lot of surveillance, right? 2013 was as much about democracy as it was about surveillance, but surveillance and technology was a significant portion of this discussion. And when we look at what happens with that whole surveillance segment, it is an expert conversation. That's an unfortunate reality, right? When you start talking to an average person about metadata, they can understand it, absolutely. When you start talking to them about, even an exploit chain and how it works, something that's very much arcane and seen, beyond the ken of the average person, you're wrong. They can understand it. But it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of explanation, right? And a lot of people, one of the things they don't have today is a lot of free time to engage in a lot of obscure conversations. Legislators today have no idea what the actual meaningful outcomes of these surveillance economies, these global mass surveillance systems really mean. And they don't care because the systemic incentives are such that they are rewarded for turning a blind eye. And they're punished for acting against it because there's a giant corporate machine behind this. And these are the guys who ultimately, in the United States, will pay you directly if you don't pass a law, or in other countries will work very hard to make sure you get positive coverage and opportunities to establish your continued incumbency if you do what they like. That doesn't work the same with individual technologists. That doesn't work the same with the people in this room. That doesn't work with Richard Stallman, right? Who could be a very, very rich man, but is instead sitting in this room with you over this week. And I think that is one of the things that we have to remember. When you talk about problems and conflicts that are happening on a social scale, on a human scale, elections are not your only recourse, right? An election is not going to be changed by a peer-reviewed paper. An election is not going to be changed by the academic consensus. Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing in discussions about climate change, right? Science is settled, but political opinion is still for its own self-interest, pretending that it's not. But technology is different. Because when you talk about hard science, when you talk about hard math, when you talk about code as law, you can export values digitally to every jurisdiction in the world, so long as your protocol can't be identified and excluded, right? If you make your protocol look like every other protocol, if your protocol looks like HTTPS 443, right? You can change the status quo not in your country, you can change the status quo in the worst of countries. And that is a fundamentally powerful thing that has always given me optimism since the beginning. The one thing I will tell you about 2013 that I did not expect is I didn't think we'd still be talking about this in 2019. I thought this was very much going to be a 2-week story because it was so specialist. I thought things would be very different than they are today, but rather far more to the negative than the positive. I have been surprised and gladdened to see that, contrary to what the conventional wisdom is, which is that nobody cares, that nothing's changed, privacy is a front page story every week all around the world today, right? Not a month goes by when you don't see some kind of legal hearing, when you don't see people talking about changing laws. It could be the GDPR in the EU. It could be all of these lawsuits against Facebooks and Googles. The world is changing and public opinion is changing. And is very much going in the favor of people who do not like what these companies are doing rather than a company's favors. The difference is the companies control the system today. The companies control the incentive today. The question is, can they maintain that control? And in all honesty, I think over the span of time, the answer is no.
Hi, Edward. Thanks for the insights. There's one sort of question that's on the back of my mind. I think as we develop this software and these technologies, We're doing so, I think you sort of mentioned it earlier, that broadly in reaction to the way that the world seems to be going, the way that the social structures that we have, the way that the establishment seems to be behaving. The software is increasingly allowing distributed, anonymous, or very pseudonymous individuals to come together and perform the services that would otherwise have been very focused, very targeted by the powers that be. So you can see this with, BitTorrent allowing the hosting of information that would otherwise have to have been placed on a server run by a particular operating company that could have been taken down. So increasingly, software is moving. It's like this, it's technology. It's the unstoppable force. And it's going to eventually butt its head against the immovable object, which is national governments, national laws, and the establishment. Something's going to have to give. Either the laws are going to change in the same way that copyright law kind of changed a bit with the advent of VCRs, or things that we take for granted today, and by that I basically mean writing software, will become controlled and illegal in parts. And we already got a taste of this, right, with crypto. In the 90s and early noughties, there was this notion of, crypto being weaponized software. The US made it illegal to allow other countries to download stuff. Which way do you think it's going to go?
Well, just a couple comments. First was about the Bitcoin protocol, or BitTorrent protocol, and the idea that previously these files would be stored on servers on a particular host, and that could be taken down. Really, that's all the BitTorrent protocol is doing, is making everyone a server, and that's the reality. Everything is a server if you're brave enough, right? When you look at this kind of dynamic, I think that's what the promise of decentralization is all about. It is erasing the old paradigms of how we think about connection. The idea that there was one big server and many clients, when instead it could be many clients who are also many servers. And when the client finishes, they become a server, right? And then serve others. These dynamics are transformative. And when the law takes a particular paradigm into consideration at the time it's written, and then that paradigm no longer exists, the law necessarily has to change, or it is no longer respected. It's no longer sort of meant. Excuse me, there's some construction noise here. When we look at that future, we can't say which direction it's going to go. I can't say one way or the other with certainty, but my suspicion is that it's going to be both. The laws will change, the technologies will change, but the trend of progress over time will be in favor of liberty, right? It's very easy to look at the problems we have today and give up. Go, the world sucks, life sucks, things are, Donald Trump is president. But when you look over 50 years, when you look over 100 years, when you look over 500 years, we're doing very well. And I think that will continue. Thank you.